Today's episode is brought to you by the Tax Defense Group. The team of professionals at the Tax Defense Group are passionate about helping taxpayers resolve their tax debt. Their services include basic tax preparation, tax audits, resolving large tax debts, and more. They actively represent taxpayers throughout the entire U.S. Call today at 800-850-7973 to get started. That number again is 800-850-7973, and you can visit them online at thetaxdefensegroup.com. We recently launched our website, ucaststudios.com, with articles about sports, special interest topics, and more. We have some cool stuff on our site. To read our content, please visit ucaststudios.com. Hi, welcome to the Talk Spot. This is Marcus, and today I'm joined again by Trevor Lane with Lakers Nation. Trevor, thank you for coming on.
Hey, no problem, Marcus. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, well, definitely. Well, I think since the last time we spoke, at least we've had games start since then. I think at that time there might have been a little bit of discussion if both Dwight and Avery Bradley were going to sit out for the season when it returned or resumed in Orlando. And it's pretty obvious. I mean, I guess Dwight came back, but Avery Bradley didn't. I guess the first thing I'd ask you is, how do you feel about the Lakers right now?
I mean, I know there's a lot of people out there that right now are kind of nervous about the Lakers, given just the fact that they haven't looked great in the bubble in Orlando. Their offense has really struggled for a while there, and I haven't checked today, so I'm not sure where they're at this moment, but they were sitting dead last in the league in offensive rating, so that's certainly been an issue. They haven't been able to hit shots, and then the one game that they finally things started to click and they look good, which is when they're in their last game against the Denver Nuggets, they had some defensive issues that crept up, and so that was a problem. So I think people right now are, at best, they're a little apprehensive about what could be coming in the playoffs, but I still think this Lakers team has another level that they're going to get to come playoff time, and they're going to be just fine. I think we're seeing a team that knew they had locked into first place, and so maybe they weren't as sharp as we were expecting them to be, but I'm still pretty optimistic heading into the playoffs that they're going to be a force.
I mean, there's a gentleman who makes content for this channel, UCast Studios. His name is Gary Kester, and he has a show called Lakers Outsiders. And I've seen him tweet. He's been posting funny things recently where he's talking about how the Lakers are. Basically the kind of jokes like, oh, the Lakers are an underdog in the first round against an 8th seed that's not even going to have a 500 record. I think that some of the woes for Lakers are a little overblown. Like, I think just saying, oh, well, the Trailblazers are for sure going to beat the Lakers, or this person could beat the Lakers in the first round, I kind of think it's so hot takey. And I know that the whole sports world in a lot of ways is kind of one big hot take. This happened and that happened and blah, 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 blah. And I think that it's one thing after a while you get a little numb. Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of it's laughable. It's, who's going to defend Lillard and McCollum, and they're going to run amok on the Lakers. And it's like, well, the last time the Trailblazers were in a playoff series, they got swept. The year before that, they got swept in 2018 by a team with Anthony Davis on it. So I'd like to know who's going to guard Davis and LeBron. But I think, you raise some serious points. I mean, with the Lakers, only a person who's a total, ideological person who hates the Lakers really believes that we're not going to win the first round. I mean, but if you're comparing us to, the greatness in terms of are we going to be able to beat the Bucks and the Clippers, which has been the talk for the whole season. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a little bit of cause for concern. I mean, honestly, all three teams haven't really played that well. The Bucks, I think I looked at the last 10 games, they're like 3-7 or something like that, or 4. Like, they don't have a really great record the last 10 games. I think the Clippers are they're about even. Maybe they were 6-4, and the Lakers are 5-5. Like, none of the top three teams have really looked spectacular, I would say, during the bubble. So I don't know. I kind of think the Lakers' woes are a little overblown. But on the same token, I don't know. I just don't think we could look at this and be like, oh, we don't have any concerns. I don't know. I mean, it's pretty obvious the Lakers definitely have shooting concerns.
Yeah, and there's plenty of reason for concern, and I totally get that, but I wouldn't be picking against the Lakers in the first round or anything like that. I think, but a lot of what you're seeing out there is just noise trying to get attention, right? And so if you say, hey, the Blazers are going to beat the Lakers in round one, that's going to get a lot more people to stop and go, whoa, wait, what's going on? Than if you just say, the Lakers are going to win in the first round, because that's boring at this point, right? Like everybody would assume that that's going to happen. But that doesn't mean that I'm just dismissing like the Portland Trailblazers or anything. I think they do present some matchup problems for the Lakers. I've been actively rooting against the Blazers, hoping that the Blazers wouldn't wind up in that 8th seed, because I don't want the Lakers to have to deal with Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum when they don't have Avery Bradley to defend them. I think that's certainly a challenge. Now, your counter makes a lot of sense as far as who's going to guard LeBron, who's going to guard Anthony Davis. They don't really have anybody to put on LeBron. AD, they can try to stick, Zach Collins, or maybe Yusuf Nurkic can try to body him a little bit. But still, the bottom line is that this is a good Blazers team. This is a team that's better than a normal 8 seed. And in that sense, it's been unfortunate for the Lakers to be the 1 seed and have Portland jump up like this. So it's it's not going to be easy. But again, these woes that they've had, the issues that they've had, I wouldn't expect them to just continue in the playoffs. I mean, as much as you don't want a team to feel like they can just flip a switch, at the same time, I feel like the Lakers have been kind of pacing themselves, and maybe that doesn't explain the shooting or anything, but I think we're going to see this team play a different level of basketball when the games matter, compared to these games that are completely meaningless because they've been locked into first place.
Well, I think also something too to remember, and I have no problem with the Trailblazers, but something to keep in mind is last year they got swept by a Warriors team that didn't have Durant. And I mean, people could say whatever they want to say, but I totally believe that this Lakers team right now is better than the Warriors last year without Durant. I think without a doubt. I mean, and yeah, that team last year with just Curry, Clay, and Draymond, I mean, they swept the Trailblazers. So I don't know. In my opinion, I definitely think the Trailblazers threat is overblown. The threats that I don't think are overblown, and the threats that I feel like aren't being spoken about enough, are the Rockets and the Nuggets. So, I mean, as of right now, in the second round, theoretically, the Clippers will probably play the Nuggets, and the Lakers are either going to play the Rockets or the Thunder. And really, honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if either team won. Like, I mean, Westbrook and Harden kind of have a little bit of a reputation for falling short in the playoffs. So if they got beat by the Thunder, that wouldn't shock me. But I feel like if we played the Rockets, I don't know. I'm actually, to be a little honest with you, I'm almost a little bit more concerned about that matchup than I am even with the Clippers. Because I feel like with the Rockets, I mean, you've got 2 dudes that can just potentially just go nuts and go nuclear. And I feel like Paul George, as Skip Bayless would say, he turns into George Paul, in the playoffs. And it's, I don't know. I mean, when was the last time Paul George actually played a significant minute in the playoffs? Was what, 6 years ago? I mean, I'm not really that fearful of him, but I feel like with the Rockets, when you put 5 dudes out there that can shoot the 3 potentially, I don't know. I'm more concerned about them. And I think even for the Clippers standpoint, I think just this idea that they're just going to run over the Nuggets, I kind of think that that's a little bit, I don't know. I don't think it would be that fluky if the Nuggets beat the Clippers, in my opinion. I mean, I would say obviously betting odds would have the Clippers as a favorite against the Nuggets, but I don't know. Would that totally shock you if the Nuggets beat the Clippers in the second round?
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely be surprising if they did. The Nuggets are a good team, and especially if Nikola Jokic is playing at a high level, they've got to get healthy. They still have a lot of guys injured, but they are an interesting matchup for the Clippers. They wouldn't be easy, but I would much rather see the Clippers have to deal with the Rockets and the Lakers play the Nuggets. Even though, again, the Nuggets are a good team, and especially with Michael Porter Jr. playing so well, and now they've got Bol who's doing things, and all of those guys. The issue with the Rockets is, and I think the Rockets, they are a bigger threat to the Lakers than the Clippers, and it's because they play so small. They play this just weird style, 6'7" and under in their starting lineup. It's hard to adjust to that. And ideally, in a 7-game series, the Lakers or whoever is playing them should be able to really zero in on what the Rockets do and make adjustments. If they catch you in the middle of January on a Wednesday night, you're probably not that prepared for specifically what the Rockets bring. And so it's hard to get ready for just that game. Where over a 7-game series, you would hope that they would be more prepared for the just kind of weirdness that the Rockets can throw at you with their tiny, tiny lineups. But at the same time, what if you don't figure them out? If you don't figure them out, you could be in big, big trouble because you're trading 3 points for 2 points, every time down the floor. And we've seen that a few times now when the Lakers have played the Rockets, and you can't do that. And so that's going to be a challenge. That's not going to be easy to deal with, especially when it's a Lakers team that so much of their defensive identity is having a big in there that can protect the rim, and the Rockets' whole offensive scheme is to make sure there are no bigs at the rim because everybody is camped out behind the three-point line. So the Rockets are definitely a challenge. The Nuggets are good, but if I'm the Lakers, I would rather see the Nuggets because they're a more traditional team where you don't have to worry about that weirdness. And I'm not saying it's an easy matchup, but I think it would be a more ideal matchup for the Lakers to go up against the Nuggets. But either way, I mean, my gosh, you look at this playoff series that's going to be setting up here. I mean, if the Lakers have to go through Portland, Houston, the Clippers, and then the Bucks or the Raptors or whoever's there out of the Eastern Conference, I mean, there's no let up there. There's no benefit to being the number one seed because it's not like you're getting a gimme series in the first round. That would be really, really tough. And it worries me a little bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially too, you consider to the Warriors' path last year to the finals. I mean, their path was a very mediocre Clippers team first round that stole 2 games and was very gimmicky and overly blown by the media. Round 2, they played the choking Rockets who, every other year they have the worst choke job you can possibly imagine. And then the Western Conference Finals, they played the Trailblazers that team had no right really being in the Western Conference Finals. And then they got swept without Durant, and then that was it. I mean, even this Bucks team is better than last year's Raptors team. And you're right. I mean, it is. I mean, from a cosmic sense, you could definitely make the argument that the Lakers have a far more difficult route than last year's Warriors. But one thing I wanted to raise real quick, though, about the Rockets really quickly is, there's kind of a weird X factor that I haven't heard anybody really talk about. And that's the fact that, I'm not sure if you saw this graph. I think I saw it like a year or two ago. But it was basically someone made a graph, and and this graph was indicating that in cities where there's better strip clubs, that James Harden performs worse in those cities. So, like, for example, like in Miami or certain other cities that are known for having really good strip clubs and really good nightlife, that James Harden performs worse in those cities. And I'm thinking, now that, you have this bubble and theoretically people aren't going to the strip club, I wonder if that means we might actually finally see a James Harden whose mind is clear. I mean, we saw it even 3 years ago. I mean, what happened that night that they embarrassingly lost to the Spurs in round 2? You remember that night? James Harden was in a strip club that night. Like, this, now that you don't have that, I wonder if we're going to be able to see a focused James Harden. We've maybe never seen it before in his career. It's going to be really interesting to see if he's able to, maybe he has another level in him.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know if it's specifically strip clubs, but just in general, the guys are now focused on just basketball, like, period. I mean, right? That's all there is to do, is to play basketball, and I think that accounts for some of the weirdness that we're seeing in the bubble. Some of the surprising players that are blowing up, or the teams that are suddenly winning games. I mean, you got the Phoenix Suns are undefeated, and just some strange things that are happening. And I think that's it's a result of a couple of things. First of all, 4 months off is going to leave everybody different levels of rusty, and so if your team happened to find a way to knock off a lot of that rust, then you probably jumped up in power rankings or whatever you want to call it. But then also just not having to focus on any of those other things going on in life. I mean, that's a skill in and of itself, is being able to balance being a professional athlete and performing on the floor while you have all these other things that you're doing, whether it's an endorsement, whether it's pumping up your social media game or whatever it is that you're working on. Trying to balance all of that and juggle it is not easy. And some guys are better at it than others. So in this environment where you don't have those distractions, maybe you could see where some players are performing better simply because they don't have to juggle those things anymore. So I think that effect is real. I think that it's making some kind of an impact. I don't know how much, but it wouldn't surprise me if we do see several teams that play better than you would expect because of that factor.
Yeah, no, I mean, you might be totally right. I find a team that, it's obviously very interesting is is the Clippers and the fact that it seems like, they have no team chemistry, and the fact that they seem like they don't even really like each other, and all the weird stuff that's gone on behind the scenes between Paul George and Doc Rivers and all that stuff. And like, I feel like with the Clippers, I mean, if this year and next season, if they don't win a title and they just get bounced in the second round of the Western Conference Final or whatever, I mean, how do you think history is going to view this Clippers team? I mean, are they going to... I don't know. I mean, what do you think history's opinion will be of them if they don't win anything?
So that you've got two different angles there. For one side of it, like, yes, people will, I don't know if you want to say make fun of the Clippers or whatever, take shots at the Clippers because once again they didn't get out of the second round or whatever happens. And they'll criticize them, and justifiably so. Look, the Clippers have been a very loud team in terms of just proclaiming their arrival, right? I mean, Patrick Beverley is going after everybody on the floor and saying they're gonna beat everybody, and LA is their town, and all that kind of stuff, on and on. So I think there will be a bit of a backlash if they flame out that early, but I think it'll be fairly short-lived because at the end of the day, it's still the Clippers, and this is still what we expect them to do, is to get bounced out early, because that's what they've historically done. Now, I mean, again, you don't expect them to do it this season necessarily, but historically we associate the Clippers with losing. And so the Clippers losing would be kind of falling right along with that narrative, where if the Lakers got bounced out early, I think you wouldn't hear the end of it for quite a while. And both of that is because there's more Lakers haters out there than there are Clippers haters. There's more Lakers haters than there are Clippers fans. I mean, let's face it, that's just the way it is. But also because the Lakers have historically succeeded, and so when they don't, then that's a story. Whereas the Clippers have historically failed. So if they do fail, then that's not as big of an outlier or big of a surprise.
Well, the thing is, too, is that you even have the whole LeBron versus Kawhi angle as well, where LeBron is held to such a different and higher standard than Kawhi. Like, if something were to theoretically happen this season where, let's say, the Clippers lost in the second round of the Nuggets, and let's say the Raptors go to the Eastern Conference Final, and they go 7 games against the Bucks and lose or win or whatever. Like, this whole chatter about how Kawhi is a top 20 player ever and how he's so transcendent and blah, blah, blah. Like, it'll just disappear and no one will even remember it or talk about it. Like, if Kawhi isn't phenomenal in the playoffs, it'll just be like, whatever. It's like, oh, who really cares about that angle? We kind of dropped that. Whereas, yeah, with LeBron, I mean, not only do you have the whole Lakers haters and just people that want to really focus in on the Lakers and really talk about them, but then you have that whole aspect with LeBron, too, where people want to talk about LeBron and slam LeBron and say, oh, and I'm not like some sycophant of LeBron James, but it's like, he obviously, these like TV stations or these shows, I mean, obviously they talk about him because he gets people to watch, but I mean, sometimes it's so over the top, and he's held to such a higher standard than Giannis or anybody else in the league. I mean, he's LeBron can do a pass and it's all he'll get slammed for this and that, whereas Kawhi, when we beat the Clippers in the first game of the bubble, when Kawhi doesn't take the shot at the end of the game and passes it to Paul George, no one said anything about that. The only person I heard consciously that said anything against Kawhi for doing that was Shannon Sharp, and he only said that as kind of a dig against Skip Bayless. He was like, oh, if that was LeBron, you would have slammed him. And, Skip had some half-baked excuse. You're like, well, blah, blah, blah. But, yeah, I think you're right. I think for the Clippers, they're a franchise that really hasn't done anything, and they act like they've done something, which, I mean, this team has seriously is, I mean, if they win a title, they'll probably be the worst team to win a title since the 2011 Mavericks. I mean, very uninspiring, just kind of like whatever. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I just feel like the whole year they've just been so ordained and talked about, and I feel like I literally haven't seen it at all this whole season. And I'm not saying that because I'm a person that hates the Clippers, although I don't like the Clippers. I mean, just watching them play games, I mean, it's one excuse after another. One excuse, I never heard anybody talk about this, but I believe it was back in December, they played the Bucks for the second time. They were at one point in a game that Kawhi and Paul George played, they were down by 40 points to the Bucks. I think they ended up losing that game by, 27, something like that. But at one point, they're down by 40. And, there was nobody in the media. I didn't hear anybody talk about that. I didn't hear anybody slam the Clippers oh, they're losing by 40 to the Bucks. It was nothing. It was just, the Clippers lost another game and whatever. And I don't know. I mean, it's a really weird fascination. I mean, I kind of feel like, and this kind of goes to, I guess, the larger scheme too, is that with the playoffs this season, it's kind of going to be really interesting to see how narratives are going to change and be formed based on how people play. And we kind of saw a lot of that last year with Kawhi Leonard, where Kawhi Leonard all of a sudden moved up to being this all-time great player, and you had people like Max Kellerman saying that Kawhi is better than Kobe after last year's playoffs. It's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen this year. Like if the Bucks, like I don't know, I've talked about this with Johnny Arnett, who's again like I co-host a podcast with him. Like we talked about this where it's like if the Bucks and the Lakers meet in the finals, and if LeBron outplays Giannis. I mean, I kind of think in a sense that might actually hurt Giannis's legacy somewhat, or at least the perception of him being the best player in the league or being like the next face of the league. I feel like if they lose, I kind of almost think that's off the table. On the flip side, if Giannis outperforms LeBron and he wins MVP and he potentially wins Defensive Player of the Year, I kind of think that will probably solidify him as the next face of the league.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to the Clippers thing, I think the Clippers are a good team. I don't think there's any denying that or anything. They play well together. They do have some deficiencies, but I think they're a legitimate team. I think they are talented. But you're right. Sometimes they do get kind of glossed over, and people don't talk about them that much, and that's because they're the Clippers. I mean, the guys that you're quoting and stuff like that. You're Shannon Sharp, all these people. It's sensationalism, right? Because if you talk about the Clippers, the ratings aren't going to be as good as if you talk about LeBron and the Lakers, and that's just a fact of life. That's just the way it goes. So I think you've got that element of it there. Yeah, it can be frustrating that, hey, the Clippers got blown out by whatever, 40, 50, whatever they get blown out by, and then it's not a big deal where the Lakers lose by 5 and the sky is falling and everybody needs to talk about it. But again, you're going to talk about the things that draw ratings, and right now that's the Clippers draw better ratings than they historically have, but it's not the same as the Lakers. The whole Giannis thing, yeah, look, if LeBron wins an NBA championship, I don't think we're talking necessarily about his legacy for this season. I think LeBron winning a championship would be more about his legacy compared to Jordan. Like, that's what we're talking about then. If LeBron can win a third championship or another championship with a different franchise, 3 different franchises, that's where people are going to start bringing up the LeBron Jordan thing again. So I don't necessarily look at it from LeBron's perspective as a LeBron versus Kawhi thing, because his legacy is already set. It is what it is. It can only, you can see it increase, but again, we're comparing LeBron and Jordan, not necessarily LeBron and Giannis. On the flip side, Giannis, I think we are comparing with LeBron, and if he does dominate and he does win and all of that, then yeah, you can say, okay, is this that passing of the torch moment that we see historically through sports, where at some point the younger guy is going to catch up and beat the older reigning superstar, right? At some point that's going to happen. I mean, 91, right? Jordan beats Magic. Like that, this is something that we see happen time and time again. And so there will be that element to it for Giannis. Can he make his claim to being the best player in the NBA? Doesn't mean he's going to be the most popular, because LeBron is a machine in terms of just the amount of revenue he brings in and eyeballs he brings and all of that. And I think even a big performance by Giannis isn't going to stop that. But in terms of his legacy, it's more about being recognized as being the guy, whereas LeBron, it's more about what is he compared to Michael Jordan, because that's frankly the level of excellence that LeBron has set over a 17-year NBA career.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're totally correct. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I definitely agree with you in the sense that, like, if LeBron loses, or if the Lakers lose in the finals to the Bucks, I don't really know if that will move down LeBron's all-time ranking. Like, I mean, it seems like most people generally have LeBron as 1 to 2, like first or second best player ever. And I feel like, I know for LeBron, I mean, for the people that feel like his losses in the finals move him down in their all-time ranking, it's kind of like, what's one more loss? He's already 3-6 in the finals. Like, what's 3-7? You know what I mean? It's just one more loss. And I mean, I'm not trying again, like I said, like I think LeBron's a phenomenal player. I think Michael Jordan is an all-time better player. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like for him, I mean, yeah, winning I think helps him move up more potentially against Michael Jordan. But I don't know if losing really is like the be all end all, because again, the people that are LeBron's people, they're gonna come out on TV and they're gonna, have all these reasons why he lost and this or that. But I do definitely think that somebody like Giannis, I think Giannis has more to gain from winning a title this year than LeBron has to lose from losing a title. Like I feel like with Giannis, if the Bucks win the title this year, I feel like I don't know where you would rank Giannis, but all of a sudden now he moves in the top 50 players of all time. I mean, maybe some people already have him there, but for him to win a title, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's serious discussion about him being like, kind of like an all-time great potentially. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if he wins back-to-back MVP and a title that year, I mean, at 25, I mean, I don't know. I could see people potentially saying that he's a top 20 player already. I don't know. I mean, if he plays phenomenally, I mean, it's going to be a little hard to argue with that, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, look, he would definitely cement himself historically. We'd always remember, okay, this guy won 2 MVPs in a row. This guy was amazing. He won championship. But longevity matters too, and so we don't know, and that's both positive and negative, right? Like we don't know what Giannis is going to look like in 3-4 years. Is he going to be? He could be even better, and that's a little bit scary. But he could be even better than he is now. It's also possible that something happens and he falls off, and he's not able to maintain this level of success. So we just don't know what that looks like yet. So I'm not at a point now where we're saying, okay, Giannis is one of the all-time greats. You'd certainly have to say he's up there if he wins 2 MVPs in a row, wins Defensive Player of the Year, wins an NBA championship. I mean, that's going to put him in rarefied air, no question. But is he like suddenly catapulted in the top 5 players of all time? I'm not ready to go quite that far yet. He's not in. Even with a championship and with that, I don't think you're suddenly putting him in that same level as Michael Jordan, as LeBron James, as Magic, as Kobe, as all these players that have done it for so long. I just don't think the longevity is there yet. But again, there's nothing Giannis can do about that. All he can do is just continue doing what he's doing, and maybe eventually he does get there because he does have that continued excellence. But we'll have to wait and see.
I know people obviously they like to compare Giannis to LeBron, but at age 25, who do you think was actually better, Kevin Durant or Giannis at age 25?
Gosh, that's tough. Giannis is so dominant on both ends of the floor. But Durant, being the shooter that he is, he's so skilled. I think Giannis's athleticism, I'm probably going to go Giannis just because of the way that he dominates on the defensive end of the floor and how much of an impact he can make there. But, I mean, you're talking about, like, if you had either one of those players, you would be ecstatic. You're talking about a generational talent either way. Like, so yeah, that's definitely a very, very close one.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a really interesting comparison in my mind, because obviously Giannis, I mean, he's such a great defender and everything, and I mean, for him, it's it's so clear cut that he's so much better than the number 2 option. I mean, it's not like Chris Middleton's a bad player, but Chris Middleton is considerably worse than Westbrook, or I mean, is even Chris Middleton, I mean, is even discernibly better than like Ibaka was when Ibaka was in his like best years with the Thunder? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'd probably have to really look at the numbers, but I feel like Giannis has done a lot more with less than what Durant had. With that being said, I mean, obviously Durant is, I mean, the dude is a phenomenal talent, but I don't know. It's really interesting. I mean, I kind of feel like from the aspect of the Lakers trying to get Giannis, I feel like us winning a title or the Bucks winning a title actually hurts our case in some ways, because I don't know if Giannis would join a team that just so recently won a title, but also if the Bucks win, I don't know if Giannis would leave a team that just won a title.
Yeah, I mean, so Giannis won't be a free agent till the I keep wanting to say summer, but it won't really be happening in summer. It'll be happening in fall, but not this free agency, but the one after. So, but yeah, I mean, it could still make a difference on his decision. When we talked about Kawhi last summer, and we're saying, okay, if the Raptors win, does that make it more likely that Kawhi leaves because it's like mission accomplished? He doesn't have anything left to do in Toronto, or does it make it more like, hey, they won and now he needs to stay and defend his crown? Like, it really just depends on the individual. You can look at it either way. So it would all just come down to Giannis, and how does he see that scenario? Does it matter to him that, hey, we're either defending a championship, or did I bring a championship to Milwaukee? I've done what I needed to do, and now I'm going to move on somewhere else. Again, that comes down to the individual player.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Writer Junkie. Are you thinking about starting a business or a side hustle? Writer Junkie offers website development, content writing, and SEO services for businesses. Call Writer Junkie today at 805-587-7966, and you can visit them online at writerjunkie.com. We'd also like to thank the Tax Defense Group for being a sponsor. So I guess, we'll just talk about it a little bit briefly, but the current Lakers roster, and so let's say in the finals matchup, let's say there's only 8 Lakers that actually play significant minutes, or let's say in the Western Conference Finals, or let's just whatever the playoffs generally speaking. If there's only going to be 8 players that are going to play significant minutes, who do you think those 8 players are going to be?
So if they're going to cut their rotation down, obviously your starters are going to be in there, and you've got LeBron, you've got AD, you've got JaVale. You got Danny Green out there in KCP. So those are going to be your starters. After that, I think it's matchup dependent, because you're probably not going to run the centers much, if at all, if you're playing, say, the Houston Rockets. But after that, Kyle Kuzma has been so good. He has to be in the rotation. I think that Dion Waiters has been playing extremely well, and so I'd be surprised if he wasn't part of it. And then you've got Alex Caruso. But again, I have a hard time seeing how they would cut it to 8, because I think you do need, in a traditional matchup, you're going to need that other center off the bench, and that's Dwight Howard. So you can't really just leave him out and assume that the Lakers can. Well, if they're playing the Rockets, they can do it, but you wouldn't assume that all of the center minutes for the entire 48 minutes of the game are going to be split between Anthony Davis and JaVale McGee. I just don't see the Lakers going that route. So I think it'll be more of a 9-man rotation, but if it was 8, I think that the 8 that you would put on there are those guys that I mentioned there, with your 3 off the bench being Kuzma, Dion Waiters, and Caruso.
I mean, is it a for sure thing that we would rather have JaVale McGee starting significant minutes in the playoffs than Dwight Howard? I mean, would you for sure want that to be the lineup with McGee over Howard? Like, let's say, and then we get to the conference finals against the Clippers. I mean, I don't know. I mean, is McGee better than Dwight Howard?
Do you have to be in order to start?
I guess.
That's really what it comes down to, right? Is we tend to see starters as, okay, who are your 5 best players? Okay, that's your starters, and that's not always the case. Like, we're going to see Kyle Kuzma, like Frank Vogel said the other day, that Kyle Kuzma is not going to start, even though he played really well against the Nuggets in the starting lineup. He said for their rotation, it's better to have him coming off the bench, but he's still going to get major minutes. I think ultimately it comes down to which player is going to get the minutes. Chemistry-wise, chemistry is something the Lakers have been looking for in the bubble. I don't know if Vogel goes away from JaVale in the starting lineup, because that's what they've been doing all season, and there's that familiarity there. And Dwight has been coming off the bench all season, and again, there's that familiarity there. But does that mean JaVale's better than Dwight? No, I think overall in the season, Dwight has been a little bit better. JaVale has had his moments, but overall, I'd prefer Dwight. But I think Vogel gets around that just by feeding more minutes to whichever big he feels like is having a better performance on that night. And so far, that's worked for the Lakers. So I would expect that to continue rather than see some massive shift in the starting lineup at this point, with the playoffs starting up in just days here.
It's another name that's kind of interesting that you didn't mention was Rondo. So does Rondo, let's say he's totally healthy by the second round, does Rondo play in the second round in the conference finals? And if he does, who does he take more minutes away from, Dion Waiters or Caruso?
Well, that's really the question, right? Is Rondo, you'd have to imagine he probably gets minutes, and I know there's some Lakers fans that are probably punching something right now as I say that, because Rondo's not. There's a large segment of Lakers fans that do not like Rondo at all, look at all of his advanced analytics, and I fall more on that side of things where I'm more critical of Rondo. and don't think that he is a fit in the modern NBA at the moment. But there's also a lot of people who will champion Rondo and say he's great, and you'll see because playoff Rondo and blah, 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 blah. And I hope that happens. I hope we see playoff Rondo. That would be fantastic. But bottom line is I think he is going to get some minutes. Whose minutes he takes, that's the hard part. Where do those minutes come from now that you've brought in Dion Waiters and he's given the bench exactly what they've needed all season long? This bench has been screaming for somebody who can put the ball on the floor and attack the basket, who can be that threat to get to the rim because it makes the defense react in a different way. And Dion Waiters can do that. He's not a perfect player, but he can attack the basket and he can take and make some tough shots. And the Lakers bench unit has not had that all season long. So I think you have to give him minutes, if only because his skill set is in such high demand for their bench rotation. So then are you putting Rondo in place of Caruso? Well, then you're losing a lot of defense because Caruso is a much, much better defender than Rondo at this stage. So it's going to be a tough call for Frank Vogel. I think he's going to have to mix and match a lot. I think ultimately he's got to figure out real quick, does playoff Rondo exist? Is this a real thing that in 2020 still happens? Does Rondo really blow up and become this superstar version of himself in the playoffs? And if that answer is no, then you've got to start cutting his minutes down. And if the answer is yes, then you've got a great problem on your hands. And you're going to have to come up with an answer. But as a coach, you would rather have more excellent players that deserve minutes than you have minutes for, then you're struggling to fill minutes because you don't have enough good players. So it would be a great problem to have if Rondo proves that he does need minutes out there.
I guess if you had to take a guess, or if you were going to bet money on this, who would you bet on? Like, let's say in the finals, let's say if it is Lakers versus Bucks, just assuming that happens. Out of Rondo, Waiters, and Caruso, who do you think will play the most minutes between the three of them?
Rondo, Waiters, and Caruso. It's going to be matchup dependent. It's going to depend on the game script as well. I think if the Lakers are down, you're playing more Waiters. Frank Vogel is very much a guy who wants to ride the hot hand too. So that's been a consistent part of his decision-making process. He wants the guy who's really been rolling to be in the game in crunch time. But ultimately, if I had to guess, I would say that Caruso is going to get more minutes because he combines so well with LeBron James. And we've seen all the advanced analytics have suggested just how good that pairing is. And ultimately, LeBron's probably playing 40-plus minutes in the playoffs. You're not going to see him playing 30 minutes. You're not going to see him playing 35 like during the regular season. Playoff time, you're pulling out the stops. So if LeBron's on the floor 40 minutes, to me, I don't think you need Rondo out there alongside LeBron. And I think Waiters and LeBron together can be a little bit messy sometimes. I'd rather keep Waiters as the scorer when LeBron is not on the floor. So for those reasons, I'm going to pick Caruso.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. So for this off season, and again, keeping in mind towards the summer of 2021 where Giannis is available, and I'm trying to remember who else is available, but let's just say for this year after the playoffs are over, if Rob Pelinka called you and said, like, Trevor, what do you think we should do? Like, what are some moves that we can do that are viable that could make us an even better team for 2021?
So if I am Rob Pelinka, I'm going to be cautious because he's got such great chemistry on this team, and that's not easy to find, and that matters. And he's built this team to have a 2-year window. This is year one. All the contracts line up for a 2-year window. So what I'm doing if I'm them is I am trying to keep as much of this group around as I can, and I'm just trying to bring in some pieces as needed that will enhance this current group. I'm not looking to make wholesale changes to anything unless something falls in my lap that's a clear no-brainer. I think this group has proved that they are very, very good, that they play well together. These guys enjoy playing well together. And again, I think all that certainly matters. Now, that being said, JaVale McGee, Avery Bradley, Rondo, KCP, these guys all have player options on their contracts. So if any of them decide to opt out, maybe that changes your decision-making a little bit. Maybe that forces you to say you lose JaVale McGee. Okay, now we have to go find another center. Or if you lose KCP, you're now looking for a shooter off the bench. In general, I'd be looking for somebody else who can handle the basketball, somebody else who can be your bench point guard. I think they need that skill set. And I'd be continuing to focus on defense and shooters to put around side LeBron James. That would be my priority if I'm the Lakers. But again, that's going to shift a little bit if, like, say, JaVale opts out or whatever. Obviously, that's going to change your priorities.
See, in my mind, I'm thinking what I would love to see happen, and like some personnel specifically, I was thinking I'd love for us to try to get DeMarcus Cousins back and actually see how good he can be in a healthy year. So that obviously means either Dwight or McGee are gone, one of the two of them. I think the big free agent sign that I would personally love to see us try to do would be go after Goran Dragic. Like, I feel like a guy like him, he's whatever he is, 34. Like, I feel like having him off the bench, I think he'd be very valuable, actually. And I think there's a possibility that maybe he comes and he takes maybe a bigger 1-year deal, potentially something like that. And I don't know. I feel like something like that is viable. And then, I don't know. I mean, I guess the long shot is, and I know every Laker fan probably wants him, but like somebody like Bogdanovich, like, I don't know. I feel like, I mean, I think he's really good. And, I think that he's a good player. I think it might be a little overblown exactly how good he is, but I don't know. I feel like some kind of combination. If you could do something like, Danny Green, THT, and maybe our first round draft pick we have this year, like after we draft him. I feel like if you did something like that, or maybe some other thing, I almost kind of think that maybe you can get Bogdanovich. I feel like there's kind of, I don't know how hot the market really is for Bogdanovich. Like, I don't know if you're going to get another team that's going to offer multiple first round picks. I don't know. I feel like something like that. I feel like if we even did like 2 of those 3 things, I think we could be in like a really good position next year. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's in my own mind when I've thought about this, because, obviously I've thought about this. I think I'd love to see those kind of moves happen. Like what you're kind of talking about, more like in the margins. But I definitely think DeMarcus Cousins, I would definitely try that experiment, at least give it a try,
Yeah, so I think there's a decent chance that Cousins is coming back. He's been ingrained with this team. They've kept him involved and all those things. Now, if somebody offers him a lot of money, then that obviously could change things. But ultimately, I could see a situation where Cousins comes back. I wouldn't even mind bringing Cousins back, even if both Dwight and JaVale are still on board. I think that he's talented enough and his skill set is different enough from what they already have to where it would make sense to carry a third center and have that be Cousins, especially when you've got injury risks and all those things. So I'm on board with that. As far as Goran Dragic, yeah, that's exactly the kind of player I'm talking about. If you can get somebody like that coming off your bench to be that combo scorer that can attack the basket, that can also run an offense, like Derrick Rose, he's under contract, but Derrick Rose type guy, Dragic, guy who's a veteran, who's been there, and can step up for you. Yeah, that's absolutely what they should be looking for. As far as Bogdanovich goes, he's going to be a free agent, so that complicates things if you try to do a sign and trade or something like that. I don't know how much value the number 29 pick is going to have, but I think the biggest factor here is, do the Kings want to trade with the Lakers? Because that's going to be a factor. Do the Kings actually want to do business with the Lakers, or like so many teams in the Western Conference and in the NBA in general, do they just view the Lakers as their main rival, and so they don't want to do business with them? Like, there's that hurdle to overcome too. So I would be surprised to see something done for Bogdanovich. It didn't get done at the trade deadline. There were those rumors floating around about a Kyle Kuzma Bogdanovich deal and some conversations that went back and forth that didn't go anywhere. So I would be surprised if it was him, but he would be a nice fit in terms of being a shooter and all of those things. That it we'll see. And I think it's also going to be interesting to see what the Lakers do with their cap space, because again, they have set things up to have cap room during the summer of Giannis. Maybe not quite enough to go get a max level free agent, but they'd be in the discussion. So if they go after anybody, they have to decide, is this player worth giving them a deal that goes longer than 1 year, and then thus limiting our cap flexibility moving forward? Or do they stick with just 1 year deals, and then does that limit the talent pool that they have access to? I think that's going to be an interesting decision that we're going to see the Lakers make.
See, I definitely lean towards that all the contracts that get signed this year will be like a 1 year deal. And I mean, I know we talked about this last year. Like, nobody thought, like, the Lakers, even after Trevor Davis, there's no way they're going to be able to get enough money to get Kawhi. And then it turned out we did clear enough cap space. I just feel like if we're $4 million shy of being able to sign Giannis, I kind of feel like they'll be able to pull off the financial, wizardry in order to get that done. If you could somehow, if you have the possibility of getting LeBron, Giannis, and Davis all on the same team, I kind of think that between the three of them and Pelinka, they'll probably figure out a way to do it. But yeah, with that said, you definitely raise a really good point. I mean, when it comes to this coming off season, I mean, firstly, there's not like there's all these tremendously great players. And, secondly, yeah, I mean, I think it's more of the margin stuff. I mean, I think even, having DeMarcus actually play, and then having somebody like Dragic, I think that could go a long way. I mean, could you imagine having Dragic over like Rondo? Already, how much better would that be?
Yeah, that would make a big difference.
And I guess that kind of even raises the specter of, let's say out of Dion Waiters, Markieff Morris, and Avery Bradley, and let's say also Dwight Howard, out of those four players, Waiters, Markieff Morris, Howard, and Bradley, I mean, who do you think is least likely to come back, and who do you feel like is the most likely to come back next year?
I would say Markieff Morris because is probably least likely because he hasn't been with the team all that long. He was a guy that they were able to find to fill a role, but does he really fit the role of the 3-and-D wing defender that they need? No, he's more 4 than 3. It's not like you go, okay, we've got Markieff Morris, so now problem solved. Kawhi Leonard's not scoring on us. No, he's not that guy. He can play a few minutes on those guys, but ultimately they need a different wing defender, I think. And that's not to say Markieff Morris hasn't done some good things. He has. He's done well. As far as most likely, I think, Dwight has said some very positive things about sticking with the Lakers and coming back. So I think that's a clear one there. I would like to see Avery Bradley back. I don't know. He might be able to get more money elsewhere. He would be a big get to have him come back. And Dion Waiters, he's been so tremendous. So I don't know how to rank those three, but I think all three of them should come back and should be brought back if the money works.
See, I kind of feel like out of those options, I feel like, I don't know, in my mind, I kind of feel like Bradley has kind of like outplayed what the Lakers are going to pay him. I just feel like some team like the Atlanta Hawks or the Kings or, whoever, kind of more of like a middling team, will probably offer him too much money for him to kind of put down, to put away. It's like, like I could see like the Bulls offering him just significantly more than we would offer him, and then him saying, like, yeah, I'll just go do that. I kind of feel like Dion Waiters and Dwight are, I mean, I feel like there's a very good chance they'll both stick around. I feel like Dion might look at it like, hey, you know what? Let me play with the Lakers one season. I'll show how good I am. I'll average, 14 points off the bench, whatever it may be, and be kind of like, hey, let me make this statement. I'll win another title or at least win a bunch more games with the Lakers next season, and then come, basically summer of 2021, I could see him basically saying like, yeah, let me, I can go get a paycheck somewhere else or a larger amount. And then, I don't know, I look at a player like Dwight and I kind of feel like, I don't think Dwight's really going to leave if the Lakers want him. Like, I feel like Dwight's made so much money, and I don't know, I kind of feel like Dwight is going to stick around because, I mean, I feel like this is the first time in a while where he's not hated by his teammates. He's also winning, and in a way too. I mean, I feel like people kind of looked at Dwight, like I know there was a lot of sports media that talked about Dwight like he was a scrub and that he wasn't really that good, like historically. And I kind of think that was kind of a load of garbage. I mean, Dwight is actually like a pretty good historical player. Again, I mean, I'm not talking about like a rankings battle, but like, I think it's completely appropriate to say Dwight's like a top 50 player ever. I mean, the dude was a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year winner, and he led a team to the finals. I mean, he wasn't like a scrub. He was a pretty good player, and I don't know. I could definitely see him sticking around, and I could see Waiters definitely trying to rehabilitate his image to get more money, and I kind of feel like Bradley's already kind of done that. So I don't know. I hope we bring them both back. I mean, I'd love to see Waiters and Howard back. I mean, I think if we could somehow get Dragic, get Cousins back, keep Waiters and Howard, and then if we could somehow get, like, even though he'd be ancient, but if we could somehow get Pau Gasol just to be that last guy that only plays, in garbage time, like, I think that would be such a beautiful Lakers team. just to see Gasol get one more and just to be with us. Like, I don't know. I mean, who knows if any of that stuff will happen, but I'd love to see it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, Powell obviously wouldn't be able to play a ton or anything like that, but just to have him to be a locker room guy, kind of be the Jared Dudley role. Like, sure, I could definitely see something like that happening. I hope that they can keep a lot of these guys, and if not, I think, whoever's out there, there's going to be a list of players that want to come and join a good Lakers team, and so I don't think there's going to necessarily be a shortage of options in terms of finding kind of role guys to come in off the bench. This free agent class isn't necessarily great, and so that's going to be a limiting factor, but there's also not a lot of money out there. So, I think the Lakers are going to be just fine either way, but the preference would certainly be to keep most of these guys that have been on the team this year and then just add some pieces to enhance what you've already got rather than go out there and make wholesale changes at this point.
So real quick before we get going, what are your predictions, to your total unbiased, as much as possible predictions for the playoffs this season?
I can say the deck feels stacked against the Lakers right now if the lineup really is, and for the playoffs really is, Portland, Houston, Clippers, Bucks. That's very, very, very difficult. But I'm gonna stay optimistic, and I'm gonna say the Lakers get the job done. This season has been great. They've got on the floor, their chemistry has been fantastic. Things have gone well for them, and I'm hopeful that they'll get back on track much sooner rather than later. And, it'd sure be great to see them win one for Kobe.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like I definitely believe that they'll get to the finals. I don't know. Like, I mean, I feel like I'd have to look at betting odds. I feel like I wouldn't be shocked if it was Lakers and Bucks that Vegas would favor the Lakers over the Bucks. But I don't know. Like, I definitely think, I for sure believe that we are definitely in the discussion of winning a title. And I saw Colin Cowherd, he's been kind of on a rant recently where he's like, oh, the Lakers aren't true title contenders. And I just look at that and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, you're just saying something just to be really provocative. But yeah, I could definitely see us winning. I mean, even for as much as I've been demeaning towards the Clippers, I mean, it wouldn't like utterly shock me if the Clippers, Lakers, or Bucks won the title. Like, and I know that's not really hot take at all, and that's pretty conventional wisdom at this point, but I think it's probably going to be one of those three most likely. And I don't know. I feel like the Lakers, I mean, one thing that we have over every other team in the league is that, we have two of the top five best players in a sport where there's only five players on one team out on the court at once. I mean, that kind of means a lot when you have a guy like Davis and LeBron on the court at any time together. And, if it's us against the Bucks and, the second best guy is, Chris Middleton, who kind of has a history of disappearing in the playoffs. I mean, I trust our two guys over Middleton and Giannis and Kawhi and Paul George. So, yeah, I mean, I hope you're right. And, hopefully we'll talk during the playoffs and then maybe after the playoffs, or at least for sure after the playoffs. And we'll have to see how right we were. And I hope, I wouldn't be shocked. It's going to be so crazy to say this, but like, we might be talking about how if the Lakers win the title, about how Caruso somehow played pivotal minutes in a finals matchup in a Game 6. And that's going to be...
surprise me.
And honestly, Caruso, who kind of reminds me of a little bit is Matthew Dellavedova. This guy where it's like, you're like, who is this guy? This kind of this scrappy underdog guy that's really good on defense, not necessarily as much of an offensive player. And, both of them, neither one of them look like professional athletes on the surface compared to other basketball players. And, yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think that, but we could really see a lineup in a Game 6 in the finals of, LeBron, Davis, Kuzma, Caruso, and like Danny Green or KCP. Like, that could legitimately be our lineup. And it's just so crazy to think about that, these, especially like Lakers fans. I mean, we've been fans of Caruso for a little while, and it's just funny that like the world is finally caught on to this guy, and who knows though. But all right, Trevor, well, thank you, man. Thank you so much for coming on again. I appreciate your time. And how can everyone kind of keep up with the content that you guys create?
Sure. Well, you can find a lot of the stuff that I do over on the Lakers Nation YouTube channel. Then you can find me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane, on Instagram at Trevor Lane NBA. And then, of course, make sure everybody checks out LakersNation.com.